Good morning, everyone. So it seems that, as always happens, a few people are still arriving, but because we got a late start yesterday, we've decided that we'll go ahead and get going this morning a little bit earlier than we did yesterday. So if it's okay with you, we're going to get things underway. Is there anybody who strongly objects? Apparently not. All right, good. Well, good morning and welcome back to day 2 of the 10th anniversary of the Rotary Peace Center here at Chulalongkorn University. I would really appreciate it, just a quick show of hands. Who is here today who was not here yesterday? Okay. Okay, all right, so the good news is that you will not, we were, of course, would have loved to have had you here yesterday. We're sure you'll make a huge contribution today. But what's important is we're going to catch you up. So, keynote speaker today, use this time to summarize yesterday and set a tone for today. That for and what was accomplished, getting you up to speed, and hopefully it will do something else. It will create an energy and get your thought processes going before we get too far into the day. So that's what our architecture is all about. Just a little reminder, today looks a little bit like yesterday in the sense of the structure of the day. So we have a keynote speaker. There's a plenary panel with a very interesting topic that's about really sort of the softer side of peace building. Yesterday it was the evolving art of peace building and community and mediation. Today it's the softer side of peace building and how to use that in a powerful way. We will also have a lunch break as usual. And then after the lunch there will be breakout sessions, as we had breakout sessions yesterday. And then today, in place of, or as a build on, the innovation labs that happened yesterday, there will be action planning sessions. So a flag, yesterday's sort of getting into the innovation labs was interesting because it was quite organic. People were invited to come to the board during the course of the day, write ideas so that people could see their ideas that could be discussed in innovation labs. And then people could gravitate to particular topics that they wanted to participate in. It was interesting because that was a very informal way of doing things as compared to the formal structure of the morning. And so it was sort of a new and a little bit disconcerting process, but some amazing things came out of the innovation labs. Imagine today that the action planning sessions will look similar. So based on this overview that I'll do, as well as the content this morning and what those of you who were here yesterday heard yesterday, you'll be thinking about action planning sessions that you might want to propose or lead. And you'll be able to write them on the board again and allow people to gravitate to those sessions as they like. So a similar kind of structure with a couple of twists. So in terms of yesterday and getting everybody up to speed, as I mentioned, there's a kind of architecture that we've put on the board. And yesterday I revealed that my name is Patricia Schaefer. I'm a graduate of class 13 of the Rotary Peace. Think of this as Catrixie, because I enlisted a Rotary Peace Fellow, Katrina Lewis, to help me think about how to express what happened yesterday and how we can sort of summarize for today. So think of this as Katrina. Patricia and Katrina put together, which is quite funny because I'm told that people keep mistaking Katrina for me anyway. So, 2 people have become one. I said yesterday that in my semi-formal role here as MC, we didn't think of the MC in a traditional way. I'm thinking of MC as somebody who is kind of the angel on the shoulder, somebody who whispers on occasion, and somebody who occasionally says, "Look this way, something important was just said that you might want to give consideration to." So I think that's the role I'll play again today. And again, this architecture is about saying, "Psst, wait, there were some really interesting things that came out of the work yesterday that if we hear them are a setup for today." And so again, a summary that will help you get your mind around today. So For those who were here yesterday, for those who have joined us today, let me quickly summarize this as a guide to the 2 days of the conference. It is the 10th anniversary. We're celebrating the 10th anniversary of collaborations prompted by and through the Rotary Peace Center at Chula Longhorn University. That means that we're also celebrating the work, the success, and the collaborations of 355 Rotary Peace Fellows who have graduated from the Professional Certificate Program in the past 10 years. That means we're also celebrating the collaborations that come out of this center with other universities in Thailand, other groups in Thailand, and places far and wide. We mentioned yesterday that there are Rotary Peace Fellows of these 355 who are now in 70 different countries. They are part of institutions, be they nonprofit institutions, for-profit institutions, hybrid institutions, that touch a wide variety of sectors and a wide variety of questions and issues and topics. So a very, very, very broad reach if you think about this center as a place that serves as a catalyst for those sorts of things. So you'll see here that we make reference to, for example, 355 Rotary Peace Fellows, but it's really Rotary Peace Fellows and the other universities that are connected with this university and the other organizations and the vast networks that are possible from being in 70 different countries. So that's one point. A second point is the thematic of the conference is innovating global peace building. And so part of what we heard yesterday, part of what we'll hear more about today, but really the work of the Peace Center seems to be, the theme that is occurring is, how do we get increasingly facile and expert at innovating global peace building? That is the essential question, right? So you see innovating global peace building up there. Yesterday, someone said, oh darn, the problem with conferences or workshops or gatherings is that you just start to get into a question and then you don't have time to fully explore it. And one of the reasons is because as you're going along, you don't have a chance to reflect, digest, and capsulize what's been said in disparate sessions. And so we're using a theme for today called anti-narrative. And see that anti-narrative is spelled A-N-T-E, not A-N-T-I. So the notion of anti-narrative is that if you get enough of the right people in one place and you collect their stories and you look for the themes, there are actually patterns or recommendations that come out of the narrative that as individuals, we don't know we all believe in collectively, but if we say, oh, look at these patterns that are coming out, then you imagine yourself as a force to be reckoned with, and you can ante up the way you make a bet, the way you play poker, to say, here are possible directions where we want to go. So this structure is supposed to serve as a sort of anti-narrative. What was coming out yesterday? What will likely come out today that could serve as a bet that we want to make about the future? So you'll see that there's past, present, and future. The past, present, and future represents 2005, the beginning of the Peace Center here, 2015, where we are today, and 2025. We picked a place in the future. So let's work in decades. So you can see there are, and again, as the day goes on, feel free to come up and look more closely. So there are 3 sections. A couple of things that seem to have come out of yesterday and this 10-year span that we have just passed were sort of pointed to by our keynote speakers, Mr. Bichai Ratakun, and our other guest speaker, and I'm sorry, I'll have to make reference to the agenda again to make sure I don't misstate her name. Our other keynote speaker, Dr. Shui Ming. A sociologist from Singapore who spoke about her husband who has been kept away for some time for his views about peace building. They said 2 things, at least. So Mr. Bichai Ratakun said, in the most difficult circumstances, at the close of the war in Southeast Asia, he had to play the role really of ambassador. And he had to speak, he had to be involved in some very difficult conversations with well-known figures who were known on the world stage for having been difficult and creating difficult situations in the course of the war. And he said the charge he was given was, despite the difficulty, and he didn't know it was called peacebuilding at the time, he was charged with 3 things, which he briefly summarized as going to understand, going to reach out, and going to develop. Now, he said development. For the sake of this conversation, and for those who speak Thai and could even be more clear about it, we interpreted that for this architecture as develop relationships or develop something going forward. So he said understand, reach, develop. So it was a very sort of unusual tack to take in the circumstances. Our other keynote speaker really gave us a story about when the voice of humanity is locked away. So when the voice of humanity, who talks about peace building as respect for human rights, civil rights, surfacing voices unheard, what happens when those voices are kept at bay or locked away or kept contained? So 2005, and we also heard from our panel yesterday that 10 years ago, from some of their perspectives, you couldn't even use the word peace. It was a dirty word, it was misunderstood, and people didn't quite know how to characterize it or define it, or there wasn't a collective thinking that it was a viable tool for managing our lives. So 2005, this notion of peace and peace building beginning to bubble up. 2015 represents plenary sessions, breakout sessions, and innovation labs that were held yesterday. If you look at the architecture that the organizers have set up, the plenary session yesterday was evolving the state of the art of peace building. And the plenary session really was about hearing from people who have become very masterful at engaging dialogue on a mass scale. They talked about a process or processes for engaging 1,200 people at a time who would normally not be brought to the peace building table. Or they used the number 22 networks, bringing 22 networks and effectively engaging them in peace-building conversations when previously those same groups might have been left out. Evolving the state of the art as surfacing large-scale dialogue for those who would otherwise be left out. The plenary session for today, as I said, is again sort of the softer side of peace-building. And the actual title is The Role of Soft Power in Peace-Building, Opportunity and Challenges for Asia. So we noticed that the arc the organizers have put forward is, what if the movement is toward really embracing the power of the softer side of peace building? Well, what would that mean? Some clues that have been given to us in the last 24 hours are, there was a session on women in peace building. There was a session on community. There was a session on youth. Today there's a session on refugees. There's a session on radicalized groups or radicalized elements. Let's pretend for the sake of this conversation that the clues are, what if in the softer side of peace building, the arc going forward is how to actively engage groups that we believe are essential to the peace building process that typically don't get fully engaged. All right, the softer side of peace building. And so you'll see the list of groups from the breakouts. You'll also see in the innovation labs other topics that may be arenas to play in. Environmental questions, CSR questions, reconciliation questions. The word Islamophobia was even used yesterday. So you'll see that. Now, I have to give him credit. Professor Srakaew said to me, I interviewed him the night before the conference, and I said, what would you really hope would come out of this conference? Where would things go with the Peace Center or sort of outcomes? And he said, you know, I'm curious why we seem to be so quick to move into a state of war these days. I want to know why there seems to be a wind pushing at our backs that makes us so quick to declare conflict instead of to stop and think and process how would we actually achieve peace. He said, I think what we need, and you'll see it on the board, I think what we need is a new imagination and level of engagement. And I think what we need to understand is, why are we so reactive? How can we actually be more proactive? So some questions he set up for the conference. Now, this afternoon, along the way, people keep kind of suggesting that they worry about the same things that the professor expressed. They are also saying, in pockets here and there, maybe we need to get really good. This is the time, 10 years in, to get really good at building social movements. And maybe the building social movements has to be done based on what we know as peace builders is effective in working with these groups that we just mentioned that are often left off the grid. Women, youth, community in general, refugees, seemingly radicalized elements, all right? So if that is the possibility for the future, another thing that has come through, if you look at the architecture of the conference, is what tools will we use? Today, in the breakouts, there will be time spent on creativity and technology, theater, drama. During the course of the conference, we've heard examples of photojournalism. We've heard lots of examples of creative engagement, or what one of the breakout speakers yesterday called the ability to package peace building, the ability to package effective stories that actually engage people in the work of peace building, versus talking to people about peace building as sort of an anecdotal concept, you know, something ambiguous and amorphous. Engaging people in actual stories of peace building, which leads to action planning. So we would like to give you 3 things that you can think about in preparation for the action planning, and for anybody who would like to suggest action planning topics today. So the 3 things are, and this has kept coming up in the last 24 hours. Since the Peace Center was originally initiated by Rotarians and people who are very active and elevated and embraced within Rotary International, and receives funding from Rotary International, what do peace builders with this architecture as background want to say to Rotary about our work? And there are some Rotarians, some very amazing Rotarians in the audience today. I've spoken with a few this morning. They're all ears, and they're ready to hear, and they're attuned to the subject of peace and peace building. So for those types of Rotarians, what do you want to say to them in what way? Be thinking about that, about peace building initiatives. What do you want or need? What do we want or need ourselves? Now note, the question isn't, what do I need? And I have to have this before I can do the work. It's, what do we need to do ourselves? So out of this conference, what do you believe we would need to do in terms of this frame that we're setting up? And last but not least, what are underutilized tools? And so again, we've given you a clue that some of those tools may lie in the creative space. Some of those tools may be technology. During the course of the conference, someone said, we are just being outclassed in social media. We are just being outclassed. We're inundated with messages that the world works the other way. You know, what do we need to do to surpass those who are effectively using creative tools to tell stories that are really not about peace and peace building? So that is an architecture just to think about yesterday and to think about today. I hope it's useful to you. I hope it sort of gives you a way to jumpstart your morning and feel a little energy around what you've done that you may not have known you did. I want to thank, again, before we get started, the organizers of the conference, because somehow in their wisdom, they saw an architecture that allows us to very organically think in these spaces. And I would like to invite you to think of yourself as a force that can take this story to 345 Rotary Peace Fellows, or 330 others, other universities, other groups, and as we said, you know, Rotary International at large. Now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce and we're right on time. It's my distinct pleasure to announce our keynote speaker for the morning and introduce him. Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, and I'd like to, if you don't mind, Dr. Ahmed, put you right there so everybody's aware. Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed, he's Executive Director of the Regional Center for Strategic Studies in Colombo, Sri Lanka. As always, his bio is in our guide, but there are just a few things that I wanted to highlight. He was born in Bangladesh and now lives in Colombo, Sri Lanka. He's currently the Executive Director of the Regional Center for Strategic Studies in Colombo. Before this role, he's been a professor of international relations and director of the Center for Genocide Studies at the University of Dhaka. He's a visiting professor in Beirut. He has authored or co-authored or edited 19 books and 6 monographs and more than 110 research papers and scholarly articles. His topic is the role of soft power in peacebuilding, opportunities and challenges for Asia. And there are just 2 snippets from the guide that I'd like to share with you before he comes to the stage. So he says in his last paragraph, hence this architecture, it fits so well, the softer side of power is what the Asians cherished for centuries. There is therefore now a global, there is a global consensus that soft power, in contrast to hard power, holds merit in the task of peace building. But then, must Asia follow nigh and take lessons from the West, or should it reflect on its own versions of soft power and contribute to its civilizational quest? My presentation will take this up in some detail. Dr. Ahmed.
Well, thank you very much for that intro. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends out there, thanks for giving me this opportunity to share some of my views. Well, let me in the very beginning clarify 2 things related to my presentation. The first one is I'm not going to use any PowerPoint. I'm a powerless, pointless person, so no PowerPoint. And the second is there is no text. South Asians are oral people, as you know. We can talk for hours. So there is no text. And so you have to bear with me, in fact. There will be some generalizations. And I was thinking, in fact, yesterday when Honorable Watakul said that he spoke non-stop for 1.5 hours, I was just thinking that back in the 40s, when I was in the early 40s, I spoke non-stop 3 hours. So I was thinking, in fact, by the time I would reach Honorable Watakul's age, which is 90, I just, can't believe how many hours I have to speak. So anyway, bear with me. I'm not going to speak that long. I'm looking forward to a Q&A. So no text, no PowerPoint. Now, South Asians love to tell stories, in fact. We can't help, not telling stories. And there are endless stories that we always, talk about for hours, in fact. And here too, in fact, as I speak on this topic called the role of soft power in peace building, I will begin by telling 1 or 2 stories, in fact. The first stories are of the ancient period, where soft power was used, in fact, in an interesting way. 4th century BC, Chandragupta Maurya was a small king, in fact. It was Chanakya Kautilla who made him an emperor, in fact. Now, when Chandragupta Maurya became an emperor, in those days, in fact, as you grow old, you end up being a sannyasi or hermit, in fact. And in fact, Chandragupta Maurya decided to become a sannyasi, to become a hermit, to leave his empire and go to the forest. In fact, no one knows, in fact, how Chandragupta Maurya died. There are a lot of legends, but factually, people are still looking for how he disappeared. Now, when he wanted to give up his empire, he called Chanakya again, who by then was gardening, in fact, retired, former prime minister. But Chandragupta said, Chanakya, you must help me in something. So Chanakya comes, as he was summoned, and Chandragupta Maurya tells him, I want to give up this empire. Now tell me, what should I do? Chanakya thought for a while and said to Chandragupta Maurya, who is the worst enemy that you have? Enemy you have not, succeeded in defeating as yet. He said, well, in these western borders, the Greeks are there, in fact. I couldn't make them understand what I was trying to do. Chanakya Maurya said, no problem. We can solve it now. Get your son, marry the daughters of the Greek kings, and it's going to be solved. And that's precisely what happened, in fact. His son, Bindusara, ended up marrying the Greek princess, in fact, at that particular time, and solved what was then known to be the Western Front. Now, the second story of using soft power was by his grandson, the famous, Ashoka the Great. Ashoka the Great, after the Kalinga War, in fact, where thousands died, he lost faith in war, in fact, and transformed what was known to be Digvijay, victory through conflict. He transformed that into Dhamma Vijay, victory through non-violence. The non-violence that we have, particularly in South Asia, cherished by Gandhi and later on Mandela, Martin Luther, goes back to Ashoka the Great, actually. Now, that also tells you, in fact, soft power was there in some form, even in ancient times. Then we have the medieval times. And the story of Zhang He would be one interesting one. The person reputed to have discovered the Americas in 1421. Now, Zhang He, a devout Muslim, got back to China to display things for which the emperor had him sail around the world. He did not colonize any of the islands or any of the lands that he visited. Remarkable, in fact, in those times. 15th century, don't forget, China was the greatest power, in fact, the greatest economic power on earth in 15th century. It continued till 18th century, then it lost out. But then Zhang He was suddenly the emperor, after the destruction of the Forbidden City from a thunderbolt, thought that somehow these external, kind of naval expedition contributed to this thunderbolt. So he forbade all the naval expedition. Zhang He returned, but the emperor's successor allowed him his last wish, and his last wish was to make the final voyage to the holy city of Makkah. Now, that's the story that you can see that even in medieval times, particularly in Asia, you did have what we now call soft power. Now, what about in modern times? Now, the craze for nation and nationalism, something that started, in 1555, Peace of Augsburg, but one can also refer to Treaty of Westphalia, 1648. You have this, passion for something which really made a mess of the entire world. And this is, the birth of nation and nationalism. Tagore used to say, the poet Tagore used to say, it's demonic, in fact. And it is the root of all problems in South Asia. That was one of his remarkable statements. Now, why that is so? Well, because of nation and nationalism, you have the Napoleonic War, you have the First World War, you have the Second World War. Now, just imagine Second World War. 6 million Jews were killed, 22 million Russians were killed. In one day in Dresden, 40,000 people were killed. And not to mention you have Hiroshima and Nagasaki. All because of nation and nationalism. Now, somehow it did not stop there, in fact. What this craze for nation and nationalism have done, in fact, they have succeeded in a remarkable way of reproducing not one dystopia, but two dystopias. And this is the fearful future that we always refer to. The first dystopia was highlighted by George Orwell. Some of you are familiar with him and some of his extraordinary books. The book that got published in 1949 and titled 1984 was the first dystopia, the Orwellian dystopia. And we are still living with that. Now, what did he say in the book 1984? The big brother is watching you. Now, somehow people thought that he got this idea when he was, the idea he got, if you look 1949, people thought that he got the idea because of Stalin, not to mention Hitler, Mussolini. He made it very clear in his diaries, which somehow people, got access to it incidentally in 1984, that he got the idea while he was working in the BBC during the war, that somebody was watching him. Now, this big brother watching us, created an enormous kind of a system. Now, one or two examples would help you to get what is this Orwellian state that we are referring to. One is the nuclearization of the world. The number of nuclear weapons that we have, and all the countries together, whether the country is liberal, capitalist, communist, authoritarian, if you include North Korea, if you include all of them, they can destroy the earth not one time, they can destroy the earth 9 times. Now, divine thought of destroying the earth only once. Humans challenged the divine and said, okay, we can destroy far better than you. In fact, we can destroy 9 times. They say if ever those nuclear weapons come to play the role that they're supposed to play, the earth rotation will change. That much power we have now to destroy ourselves. Now, the Orwellian state also created kind of system of watchdogs, that if you walk in London City, for example, you can be photographed 400 times without your knowledge, because the big brother is watching you all the time. Now, that's the kind of a system the Orwellian world that we now live in has created. And this is one kind of dystopia that Orwell flagged early on. Then we had another creative writer, and he came out with a book, taking cue from Orwell, actually. And this is Haruki Murakami, coming with a book called 1Q84. Now, since 1984 is no longer, and this book was published in 2009-2010, it's a trilogy. It's a romantic novel, in fact. I would tell everyone who has not read it, it's a lovely book. If you pass 20 pages, you can pass the next 1,500 pages very easily. Now, Haruki Murakami takes cue from Orwell and uses the word a letter Q. In Japanese, 9 is pronounced Q, and very imaginatively makes this second dystopia endless. Now, what is that second dystopia? Well, Murakami is saying, yes, the big brother is watching you still there, but there is something else has come up, and that is little people are watching you. And these are the thugs, the smugglers, the terrorists, the enormous, we have a word in South Asia, the mastans. They are also very creative. 911 would be a good example if you are familiar with the number of 16 to 17 terrorists making a mess of the world. The immediate destruction of 911 was something like $60 billion, and that was minus the stock exchange downfall. So you can imagine how, or the capacity of little people, what they can do now in this 21st century. So you have the hard power, the nuclear weapons and all. You have the Orwellian dystopia, and then you have the Murakami dystopia. Now, how do we recover soft power out of this, kind of structure that we are now living in? That's the question. How do we make use of soft power? It's not an easy task. One way of answering that would be to look into a debate that took place between a poet and a physicist. And both of them are Nobel laureates. I'm referring to the debate that took place way back in 1934 between Einstein and the poet Tagore. Now, they were debating in an interesting question, in fact. And the question was, can there be beauty or truth, or by implication, the table and the moon, without human beings? The poet, who is supposed to be a mystic poet, answered with an emphatic no. No human beings, no beauty, no truth, no table, and by implication, not even the moon. Einstein understood beauty very quickly. He said, I can understand beauty. Without human beings, how can you say, Taj Mahal is beautiful? Because we really don't know whether the dog and the cat also looks at Taj Mahal and says, oh, it's beautiful. We really don't know as yet. So he understood about beauty. But truth, he says truth. Tagore went on and said, yes, truth is realized through human beings. Who will say this is false or truth? Only human beings can say. Now, at the very end, in fact, Einstein, don't forget, this is the person who had this fabulous statement, imagination is more important than knowledge. He ends up by saying, in this particular debate, it seems that I am more religious than you are. Because here is Tagore, not giving up on the human beings. Now, he got this idea from a particular sect in Bengal, the Bauls, in fact. They have this idea of what the Bengali would be Manav Dharma, the religion of man. He came out with a book, actually, Religion of Man, that the divine stays inside human being and not outside. Now, the implication of this debate is enormous, because what it means is that without human beings, you are not going to have the Rotary Club. No human beings, no Rotary Club. No human beings, no Chulalongkorn University. No human beings, no craze for peace building. You need the human beings, in fact. Now, the problem with that is, one can easily see that you need to empower human beings. That's quite clear, in fact. But the problem is, humans are multiversed, and that's the issue. The humans are diverse, in fact. There are millions of them, and they have million minds. How do we, in fact, address this multiversed humans? Well, the first person to recognize the sanctity of human being was Aristotle. Don't forget, he was the one who said humans are homo politicus, that humans are political beings, or humans are social beings. Now, he said at a time when monarchy was prevailing, slave system was there, but he came out with this concept of homo politicus. Now, what it meant is this, that each and every person has inherent political rights, and those rights are not negotiable. If those rights are violated, there will be conflict, there will be violence. Now, years after, in fact, there were other philosophers, in fact, who said, well, Aristotle is right, that humans are homo politicus, but then humans are also economic beings. We are also homo economicus. and this was John Stuart Mill and Karl Marx and many others, comes with the idea that humans are homo economicus. And what it means is this, that each and every person has inherent right to work, right to prosperity, right to profit. If those rights are violated, then there will be conflict and violence. And we have seen over the years, in fact, how the homo economicus has come to play its role. But then you have other philosophers coming, and this is where the soft power enters, that humans are also cultural beings. We are homo culturicus. That is, each and every person has inherent right to dress, right to gastronomy, right to his or her music, dance, drama, etc. If those rights are violated or not allowed, then there will be conflict and violence. And we have seen how this cultural being has come to play a role throughout the world in recent times. But then humans are also technological beings. We are homo technologicus. We cannot live without technology. This glass is a technology, this microphone is a technology, the pencil is a technology. The two hands are made to make technology. Only humans need technology. No other beings require technology, in fact. Now, the person who addressed this in an interesting way was Gandhi, and I'm referring to Mahatma Gandhi. Because way back, he was criticized for something, and that was his use of the spinning wheel, charka. The critics were saying, Babuji, you are taking us to the medieval times. In fact, why this charka? Why this spinning wheel? Now, he comes up with an interesting statement. And this is what he says. And this is a book on the Bhagavad Gita, where he mentions, anyone, and let me quote him, anyone who still clings to the spinning wheel would be looked upon as a fool. A wise man, however, will mean by the spinning wheel not an article made of wood, but any type of work which provides employment to all. Full stop. So the technology has to be for all, in fact. You cannot have a technology just for few. Then you are going to have violence and conflict. And we have seen with a particular technology, the mobile phone, in fact. If you remember, in the old, earlier times, the black phone, how powerful it was, in fact, whoever had it, in fact. And now, with the mobile phone, you have mobilization. That is what Habermas uses the term, mobile and mobilization. There are people, even the rickshaw pullers, if you come to Bangladesh, the rickshaw pullers are also using mobile phones. So, everyone. And that mobile and mobilization, or the use of technology for all, tells you that humans are homo technologicus, and it has to be for everyone, in fact. Now, humans are also ecological beings. We are homo ecologicus. We cannot live without ecology, in fact, without forest or without environment. Even after building something concrete, we put some flowers, in fact. Now, why we do that, no one knows, in fact. We destroy the forest, but then we bring the plant inside our house, because we cannot live without flowers or without plants. In fact, we are ecological beings. Finally, and this we can't leave our guru, Freud, out, because when night falls, we have to remember Freud. We are psychological beings. We are homo psychologicus. And that means the mind is superbly important. It has to be addressed. Now, humans can take, for example, it can take everything. But humiliation is something that humans can't take. Other beings, we really don't know whether they can, tolerate humiliation. But humans can stay with little food, can sleep anywhere, suffer cold, even hot weather, but cannot take humiliation. That is because the mind, there is something in the mind, in fact, where humiliation becomes a serious problem. Now, if that is the case, in fact, one can easily see that what needs to be done is to have a mind, in fact, which is conducive to peace, which is conducive to equality, fraternity, liberty, whatever you mention. Unless that is there, I'm afraid we are not going to go very far. Now, that tells you that reason why UNESCO came out with this particular, logo. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. Back in 1945, and it's an anonymous author. Some say it is Hafiz, but no one is really sure. And the statement is, since wars begin in the minds of men and women, it is in the minds of men and women that the defenses of peace must be constructed. I think that tells you, in fact. And how do we do that? That is where education comes. You see, humans are the only being who need education. This is Immanuel Kant. Kant way back said no other being requires education, only humans. Now, if that is the case, one can see that when it comes to peace building, and particularly when we refer to soft power, we can easily see what we need is to use some of these elements that I have talked about. Humans as cultural beings, humans as psychological beings, humans as ecological beings, and not to mention humans as technological beings, in fact. These are the softer side of humans, in fact, which can bring them together. So, let's make use of technology that we have in our pockets, in fact. It's an enormously powerful technology. And let us invest this whole thing on the youth, particularly when it comes to education. Now, how do we do that? One way of doing that would be for the future generation, and I saw, an interesting kind of activities that were chalked out here. It is possible, in fact, to bind the youth in an interesting way now that we have the technology. My center, based in Colombo, we have this course called Creative Diplomacy. Just to give an example. It's called Creative Diplomacy, where you have musicians, you have poets, but also you have the arc diplomat, the traditional people who know UN and others. So there is this mismatch of traditional diplomacy with what we refer to as creative diplomacy. But then there are speakers from all around the world, in fact, hooked up. From Leiden, the historian is speaking to this group in Colombo, from Kathmandu, from Bangladesh. So you have, you have a structure now where I believe even this group, in fact, can come up with courses where we can link the youth in an interesting way. And I see no reason why Rotary should not get involved in that, given the fact that they already have something called Rotary e-clubs. I'm sure some of you are familiar with that. Now, there's no reason why we can't have Rotary semi-virtual peace-building university. Because, and I'm using the word semi-virtual, you need to meet. There's no doubt about it. You need the physical contact. But then, you also can get a bigger audience, to know each other, interact to each other in an interesting way, and then finally, in fact, meet and be friends in an interesting way, bypassing the national curriculum, the national agenda, the national kind of a phobia or a, whatever national feel, everything, in fact, because that passion somehow needs to be displaced, particularly now that we are living in this age of globalization. Now, I will not take that, I'll just end by saying, let's have some discussion, some Q&A. That this soft power that we are referring to And this is very different from the way Joseph Nye looked at it, in fact. I'm not interested in making one country greater by using soft power. Now that everybody uses the soft power, China uses soft power, even the Chinese government, not to mention the Thai military also talks about soft power, not in the sense of making you big, but in connecting, in fact. And I think that's possible. And once that connection is done, I believe the hard power that we have can, we can say that we can let go the hard power for some time. Let's keep our dreams alive. Thank you very much. Shall we take some questions? Yeah. Please. Is there any mic that?
Yes,
oh, the.
And like yesterday, there's a mic here, and if you want to come up, if you know you're going to be asking a question, and sort of queue up here, that would be great.
Yes, please.
Good morning, Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed. I'm your namesake. My name is Imtiaz Ahmed. I'm a Bangkok-based journalist. Just going back to your earlier reference to, firstly, I compliment you on a very interesting and insightful talk. Going back to your first references to Chandragupta Maurya and to Ashoka, the interesting thing about both these rulers is that they both voluntarily walked away from seats of power. Can you cite anybody since that time in history who has done the same?
Well, the easy answer would be Mandela. Mandela left power at the, when he was very popular. I can't think at this moment other than Mandela, but I'm sure there may be one or two more. But Mandela would be a good example in modern times. But your question reminds me of Gandhi. You see, Gandhi used to talk about Ram Rajyo, kingdom of Ram. So in Gujarat, which is predominantly a Hindu area, once he was asked from the floor that, Babuji, you talk about Ram Rajyo, can you give a modern example? Now everybody thought that where will Gandhi come up with a modern example of Ram Rajyo, in fact? Because this person was saying nobody knows about Ram Rajyo, whether it is legend or whatever. Can you give a modern example? And he says, yes, I have modern example. And the modern example that he gave shocked the people, in fact. And I always say, Nathuram Godse decided to kill him on that very day. He comes with an argument, he comes with an example. He says, the period of Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar are the periods of Ram Rajyo, full stop. Now, these were the first two caliphs of, after Prophet. So here is Gandhi giving example of Hazrat Abu Bakr and Hazrat Umar as the periods of Ram Rajyo. But Nelson Mandela would be a good example. Next. Sure, please.
So in your listing, you said Homo technologicus, I think, and then you gave the example of mobile phones being used for mobilization. And my question is, often mobile phones are used to just get information to people, factoids. Could you give us an example of how you think mobile phones are being used effectively for mobilization?
Good. You see, the mobile, all technology, you can, there's a negative and a positive side to it. You need to build on the positive. Demons can be creative. Don't forget, whether it's Hitler or Osama bin Laden, they were also creative, demonically, let's put it that way. So creativity can be good, creativity can be bad. Now, technology can be used in both ways. Now, the way some of the apps that have come up, particularly those who are in the health would know, there is already the use of mobile phone, particularly on the issue of health, which is remarkable. When it comes to pregnancy, even in remote areas, this has been used in an interesting way, in fact. Now, I see no reason why this planet still has, around 40 to 50% illiteracy. In many places, more than that, because the apps allows you to make 100% literacy. Now, how that can be done? Well, you can try at your home, in fact, and I did in my home, in which it's so simple. Now everybody has an old laptop or old computer. Just clean those old computers and put 3 simple programs. Simple English, if the language is English, or simple Bengali or Urdu or Hindi, whatever, and put simple arithmetic, for example, and give it to the person who is not literate. Believe it or not, that fellow can get into that computer so quickly. And I have seen with my good example, in fact, back home, it's a lip, in fact, which is remarkable. So it is possible, in fact, to use this whole technology to make the world 100% literacy. There's no reason why people would be, 50% cannot read or 50% cannot write, because now it allows you in an interesting way. Even the translation, for example, is, people used to take so many hours to learn a new language. That also is becoming, irrelevant now, because there is a technology where you speak. There will be a translation which at least the other person can understand. And I've seen that work, particularly in Japan, in an interesting way. So yes, technology can be negative, but there are, you need to build on the positive element of Homo technologicus. Do we have any more questions? No burning questions? Good? No. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Patricia asked me, please say something about the breakout. So, but before that, maybe just to say that Professor Imtiaz Ahmed came here once, reminded me when he spoke, and I was listening to it, and I was really reminded to some moments when I listened to Ajahn Sompong from Laos. Human being and the issue of interconnectedness was emphasized by Ajahn Sompong. Interconnectedness. And the issue focusing only on one point that Professor Ahmed said, the uses of technology. But the real challenge is the human side, the word human and technology, human connectedness, which is much more the core of our agenda, not only how to get connected. So only human beings now are asked to be the agent of thinking together forward. So in that sense, I would like to say my deep appreciation for us to link the very deep currents of possibilities for us so that we can stand up to the new challenges together. The next session will be also telling a lot about how human connectedness and how the still big challenges are around with us through our panelists from all over this part of the world. So may I now invite you for the break, and also another applause for our keynote speaker. Okay, we have about 20 minutes for the break. Thank you.
On the break, two things. I'd of course enjoy your break, but also on this right side of the panel, if you have ideas for the action planning sessions, please feel free to start writing them here and in this block. And on the left side, we're going to start summarizing the breakout sessions from yesterday so we have that content. Thank you. joined by Stephanie. That is genius.
อนุญาตบอกนิดนึงว่าเวลาพูดอยากให้เอาไมค์ใกล้ๆเพราะว่าตัวเนี้ยจะชัดสุดแต่ตัวอื่นถ้าเอาห่างไมค์มากมันจะทำให้ฟังและคนฟังไม่ค่อยรู้เรื่องห้องนี้เก็บเลยค่ะตีออดิโอมันทำไม่ค่อยรู้เท่าไหร่ This is คุณสมพงษ์ So you two will be ค่ะใช่ค่ะ You two will be the chair panelist. He's the one who provided the white. Yeah, that's right.
Can I sit here or?
We can change.
Oh, we change.
I don't know who's first.
Oh, first.
Yeah. So
Okay, just change.
yeah, I'll just you move when you're finished, and I'll move when I'm finished. This is yours here, is it?
Yes.
Oh, this one, yes. Oh, okay.
everyone, and welcome back. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things before our facilitator and next plenary session panel are introduced by Professor Srakaew. We have our first recommendation for an action plan session idea, a really good action plan, how to establish guidelines that could be shared throughout the Rotary system on what constitutes peace projects. What do they look like? What are some of the principles that are in play? And the idea, the reference point was apparently there's something called sphere guidelines that this might be modeled after. So I point that out because it's our first idea. You know, please keep adding to this board any action planning discussion ideas for the afternoon that you'd like to cover. And then what will happen different than yesterday is Stephanie on the Rotary Peace Center's staff team, once the ideas are up here, we'll take the ideas and post them on a large sheet over here. And the sheet will say, what is the action planning session topic idea and where will it be located? And you'll see that, you know, after lunch and certainly after the breakout sessions which precede the action planning sessions. So is that pretty clear to everyone? Clear? Okay, thanks. Second thing is, today for lunch, we'll all be having lunch in one space. The invitation is to all to be together if you would choose to have lunch in one defined space. And a couple things, I'll tell you where it is, but really the person who's going to lead the train over to the lunch is standing here, so look for this lovely lady as we head out to lunch. And it's actually across the street. It will be in the Vidhayapatana building and is in the canteen, is that right? In the canteen. So canteen, Vidhayapatana building, right across the street, and here's our guide to get us across the street for lunch. And all are welcome. I think those are the two housekeeping things for the moment, and now Professor Srakaew is going to introduce our facilitator and panel topic.
Thank you, Trixia. We now come to the second plenary. The plenary would be moderated and chaired by Professor Thitinan Pongsudhirak from Political Science faculty. He has been at Chulalongkorn University after his PhD work from England, which is the place where his 1977 thesis was getting the United Kingdom's Lord Bryce Prize for the best dissertation in comparative and international politics. These days, he has been devoted a lot of his time in teaching as well as in #1 think tank on campus. Chula as a university is learning how to adapt to be more policy responsive to the needs of the region and the world, where he has been a pioneer in this aspect. So just recently, among several awards, the Institute of Security and International Studies, ISIS, where he has been leading. Recently, among the awards was the SOPA Award. SOPA is a Society of Publishers in Asia, the excellence in opinion writing in the media, the award given to him and also to the ISIS. And ISIS, may I mention that it has been ranked #1 in the area of policy think tanks in the area of security and international studies for Thailand. But you wouldn't believe me, ISIS has very few staff. Now may I introduce you, present to you, Ajahn Dr. Thitinan Pongsudhirak, who will moderate the next session, and may I also invite you to come up, yes? And may I invite all the speakers to come up to the stage. Our speakers are from various parts of the world. I will not, the details are in the booklet, but you can see from it that we are very much honored by the panelists. Now, the floor is yours, Ajahn Thitinan. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Good morning. ขอบคุณมากครับอาจารย์สุริชัย First, I want to apologize for having consumed already 5 minutes with my personal details and the details of ISIS Thailand. Let me proceed straight to the speakers. We have 5 speakers for less than 1 hour. That's injustice. That's injustice. We have in the world, as you know, a peace deficit. We have a lot of war, conflict in the news, even today, a lot of tension, and not a lot of peace. So I think something like this, a colloquium like this, is something that we are honored to have, and I'm honored to be a part of at Chulalongkorn University. Also, it's my first time in this building, so very good to be here. I'm not going to read the bio details about the speakers. Please read them yourself. They're all very qualified. They're experts in their own right as practitioners, theoreticians, academics. There are 2 strands of speaking engagements today. I read the bios, and I think that the first 3 are related to the kind of the population movements. We can call it migration, refugees, asylum seekers, and so on. But sometimes just to be on the safe side, I say population movement. So I think we'll hear from them first, and then the last 2 will be more on the human rights dimensions. So our first speaker, with no ado, is Dr. Abu Tahay. Please. And Dr. Tahay has a background from Rakhine State. That has been much in the news. He's spent a lot of time abroad as well. Please, Dr. Tahay.
First of all, I would like to convey my humble greeting to all scholars, participants, speakers, distinguished guests. Good morning, Chapatikap, and in Burmese, Minglala. I think everybody can see me. I'm appearing here. But my country do not see me because of denying our existence in my country because of my ethnicity. Everybody aware of this? This is Rohingyas. Today, as a human being, we are living in the world. That means we belong to the world, but we live and we belong to the world indifferently. I would like to say some type of the world where we are living now. The first world, we are living seriously in troubles, wars, violence, attack, as well as persecutions because of ethnicity, because of politics, because of their citizenship status. These are the factors make us differently living in the world, force us to displace. The first one. Second words I would like to introduce here is, today we are living in the worlds, the people in which have ever broader horizons and where impetus to migrate has its root in the merit of social, economic, political, and cultural. Pull and push factors, this is the second words. Because of this, migrations and mobility come out to our hands in everywhere. There is another distinct world, but we cannot imagine the people in which are living, repressing conditions, repressed institutionally, barring their basic right, also force them to leave their home to the sea, taking the risks. That is why these people become displaced locally or internationally. There is another world. People are living there, getting the privilege, some of the majorities, influencing the minority peoples based on their ethnicity, based on their religions and faith, force them also to flee their homelands. And this also causes violence and attack on them because of ultranationalisms, because of majority influence. When those things happen in the place, all leaders, religious leaders, community leaders, political leaders, as well as scholars are silent on that issues. That is why the people of those world are forced to live to the sea at the risk. When they reach to the sea, they become victims of human traffickers. Nowadays we are facing in Southeast Asia. Finally pushed back to them. Mass grave already taken place in Southeast Asia. If we like to name in Bangkok, Thailand, and Malaysia. These people are not normal migrants. So migrant will be happens. Mobility cannot be prevented because of impossibility of policy. The whole borders of the world. If we preventing of the people who are forced to leave by stopping their flight, by stopping their boat, is denying their basic right. That is also not allowed in international law. So that we need to properly look into the root causes of people displacement and to address the issues properly to make peaceful coexistence and also to establish durable peace and stability in their country as well as beyond the countries. Migrant is normal issues. We cannot mix migrant to the displacements. Migrant is movement of people of flow from one area to one area because of their properties, looking for better futures, or to rejoin their relatives. This is totally different from refugees. There is peoples already displaced from their home and from their own country because of, to avoid long-running civil wars, to avoid legalized discriminations on them, to look their security and safe, better life elsewhere. These people become already displaced. But those people who are not getting right of return to their home, as well as they don't have chance to get legal status. Wherever they reach, they are still in this place. Maybe in the sea, maybe in the mountain, maybe in the detention camps, how we going to address this displacement. After displacement, whoever receive a status of refugee, we able to create their right of return. If denied their respective country, we can do their permanent settlement in elsewhere. Then also, we need to look their legalistic to the countries and also grant to works and access for medical treatments. For examples, in my country, in my own countries, millions of Myanmar people fled the country to avoid long-term civil war and also persecutions of previous regime. Now they become undocumented illegal immigrants and workers in Southeast Asia, Middle East, and as well as Australia. If I'm not mistaken, there are 130,000 of Myanmarese people are able to get registered under UNHCR in Thailand, around about 150,000 in Malaysia and 10,000 about in India. But millions of people are already displaced without getting legal status. That will make every country, every region instability going to affect everywhere. So for the particular case of Rohingya peoples, since 1942, 2.5 million of Rohingya fled from the country because of persecutions, because of denial of their existence and stripping of their citizenships, blockage of higher learning, no access for the workings, no access for the medical treatments, restriction on marriage, restriction on childbirth, and also restriction on the practice of religions, restrictions of maintenance of religious building, so confiscations of documents and lands, arbitrary detentions, raping case, and etc. Most of them are living in Middle East, in Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, as well as in Southeast Asia, including Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, to Australia. We cannot consider this is the issues of people flow from area to areas. We need to look into the root causes of these people why fleeing. For that case, we need to do activities to make peaceful coexistence among the diverse people within the countries and beyond the countries. Then also we need to look into the legalistic right wherever they reach. Before that, if we are unable to address legalistic right, there will be blockage of right of return. This will make more worse to the regions as well as globally. So everybody have responsibility to protect influence of majority to minority peoples, locally and internationally. Hope everybody look into the real root causes of displacements and mobilizations and become refugee, then legalistic right, right of return, and peaceful coexistence after right of return. What's our need of these peoples? Who have obligation to do this? What we can do for that? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tahay. I'm very sorry that the sound system is not very good. It echoes a little bit, so I was not able to catch the full extent of your remarks, but I think that you drew a distinction between migrants and displaced people. We have a lot of questions about Rakhine State and Rohingyas, including the election results, which were a bit surprising to me. We'll come back to you. I have to ask for forgiveness for all the speakers. We only have less than 10 minutes for each of you. Otherwise, we cannot leave on time. So the next speaker is Dr. Anoop.
Thank you, Achan. And I'm not a doctor, by the way.
Yes. Well,
Just
if you could address, be concrete,
Yep.
2 or 3 points, and then
Absolutely.
since the theme is peacemaking, peace building, is there any way forward, pathways toward peace?
Absolutely. And thank you very much. My name is Anoop, and I'm the regional representative of the ACT Alliance. And one of the things that I was quite struck about was when Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed just mentioned that the problem of most problems that we have today is because of the nation state. And that is true, and I'm reminded of Benedict Anderson when he was talking about the fact that nation states are imagined communities. The construct itself consumes everything else, where humanity is subsumed and sacrificed at the altar of a nation state, the conception of a nation state where you have others. And when we talk of migration, when we talk of refugees, when we talk of people moving across borders, it is this exclusivity that makes that distinction. And I think it's important for us to underline that. I'm sorry, is that okay? All right, thank you. So it's about understanding why do we have that exclusivity when we have people moving across borders. And I'm particularly struck at the point when we look at Europe and the sudden sort of issue of refugees flowing into Europe and it becoming a refugee crisis. This was a crisis before. There were millions of refugees in Syria, in Lebanon, in other countries. How does it become a refugee crisis when people are at the doors of Europe? Doesn't it matter to anybody else? If you look at statistics, and I'm sure Dimitria and others have got that, where you've got 1.5 people for every 1,000, where you have 69 in Lebanon, what sort of statistics are we looking at? And I think for us to talk of peace, we need to look at some of the fundamental causes of this movement of people, this mass movement of people. Migration has always happened. It is not something that is new, and it's not something that is, but the responses to it have been securitization of borders, where we are seeing more militaristic responses to movements of people. That was not the case we had before. Our conception of identity, however constructed it is about securitization, not about protection. People are not at the center of states responding to this. It is the conception of security as we think of it, rather than the protection of people who should be at the center of our policy-making decisions. Look at the responses of what you see at what happened in Paris. The response has been more bombings. Is that going to help? The response has been a coalition of battering a country that is already being battered, for good, thank God. What on earth are we talking about? Where is humanity? Where are these people going to go? Who are we talking about? Are the 190 people who died in France more important than the millions who are going to be battered by bombs, who don't have anything to do either with Daesh or with anybody else? Are we asking those questions? Should we be asking those questions? When refugees come to your border, you have a problem. Why are we different? How are we different? I was struck by the fact that there were pictures of thousands of refugees moving from Europe after World War II into other parts of the world. The response was not the same. The response was different. The 1951 convention came up because of the refugee movements across in Europe. And it was so Eurocentric that you needed the 67 protocol to be brought in because it was not wide enough. It is just laying the fact that we need to look beyond. When we look at peace building is about empowering communities. Communities on the ground, how can they be part of the decision-making processes? And how does war and the kind of development affect them? And that is where the central point is. None of the decision-making, none of the aspects of modern-day diplomacy really considers that. And many of our organizations, the ACT that I belong to, and the Asia Pacific Refugee Rights Network, which I worked with before, is talking about how do you empower the people who are affected by it most. As Doctor said here, these are people who do not have a voice in the decision-making process. You can only have peace and collective peace. And peace is not about the fact that there is a lack of war or lack of violence. It's much more than that. And I think that is what we need to really underline. And in the ASEAN context, while we talk of people coming together, some of the most vulnerable communities may not be affected by the One ASEAN movement. The state's responses in May to the Rohingya crisis was, the initial response, was a point to be mentioned. Everybody pushed everybody back. The 2,000 people on boats in the sea, when international and national uproar made states to take a different position. And that's important for us to keep in mind. And this has happened before. 2015 May was not something that happened in isolation. It has happened before, and it will happen again. As long as we, as people, as citizens, begin to realize that we are part of a larger humanity and we need to think beyond our borders. If people need support, if they need support and they're coming to our borders, we need to provide that. It does not reduce our humanity, it does not reduce who we are. Our cultures, our religions are not so soft that they would crash the moment you have people coming in. And that would be my central point, is peace building needs to be seen not from the perspective of sovereignty, but about human beings connecting with each other. And I would just stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just for perspective, before maps were drawn around here, in fact, you know, during the years of war and conquest in mainland Southeast Asia, captive labor, people, when you were taken over, they took you away. So migrants went, they became captive labor. They actually were wanted for labor productivity. You mentioned ASEAN. On May 29th, 2015, earlier this year, in response to the boat people crisis, there was an international conference convened in Bangkok, and they made a little bit of headway, but there was no follow-up. So we perhaps could be looking at it as a concrete policy coordination among relevant governments in the region to address this crisis, which will happen again seasonally. It will happen again in April 2016. Our next speaker comes from a long way, Germany, I think. Miss Dimitria, Clayton.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk today about some of the issues that are being raised around migration and refugees and asylum in Europe, which is very much in the focus of the international debate at the moment on developments of this kind. It's a slightly different perspective from Anoop's because it's a policy perspective. I work for a regional government body in Germany that to a certain degree has been very engaged in developing policies that on the one hand are supposed to contribute to managing, regulating migration, on the other hand aimed at meeting minimal standards of refugee protection. Before I get to that though, I'd like to use the opportunity to point out something that I think is extremely important. With all of our attention on the challenges, on the difficulties associated with migration, we need to keep in mind that migration and mobility have been key to the development of humankind. I can remember a time in Europe when we were talking about winning the battle to get the best brains, and the connection of developing economies, and the connection with the idea of innovation, in connection with the idea of demographics, in connection with the idea of getting young people who may one day help pay our pensions. we were very much into the idea of creating legal avenues of migration, creating space for jobs from the best, for the best brains from places like Southeast Asia, from places like the United States. We had people leaving Europe in this competition. One of the biggest sources of doctors living outside of Europe or living outside their own countries are German doctors, for instance. High-skilled personnel that has also immigrated from Europe to contribute to this process of development. Europe has been sort of a prime destination for international migrants. 72 million, it's a sort of larger percentage of migrants traveling to Europe than, say, for instance, even to the United States or North America, which one might find surprising. And nevertheless, it's only less than 1% of the total population. So we're talking about a small number of people and making a massive debate about the strains that they're putting on the resources of our economy. And this is not, it's not a balanced debate that we need to be looking at. And given the contributions, again, that migrants make to the development of our societies, I think we need, again, to keep in mind the positive aspects of these movements and the heterogeneous nature of migration and mobility. Speaking briefly about, I guess, sort of the focus of our discussion today, refugees. There have been about 3,000 people who have died in the Mediterranean trying to enter the European Union. Another key area of entry into the European Union are the Balkan states. The more successful we've become at closing off the Mediterranean, the more necessary it's become for people to find other avenues into Europe. It's a dangerous journey. It's an extremely dangerous journey, and we're not looking at the cost that closing off Europe is costing in lives, which is costing it in freedoms, and the amount of money that we spend in building borders and building walls and building fences, this money could be invested in other areas, in a more just economy, in a more constructive engagement in the conflict areas of this world. And I think we would be better off for it. Because the fact of the matter is, the continued focus on combating smuggling, the focus on building borders, the focus on restricting asylum policies is not helping. People are still coming. And fair enough. The problem in Europe, and one of the biggest problems in Europe, is that the policies that are designed to control these movements are not working. And Europe happens to be one of the countries, or one of the regions, in the world that is the least tolerant of migration. The Gallup has surveyed once 142 countries throughout the world, and they found that the European Union is one of the areas that is most resistant to migration, and not because the resources are not there to support immigration. The logistics are there. If you compare the GDP of the average European country to a place like Lebanon or to Turkey, which is taking on most of the refugees in this world, it would theoretically be possible to take on a lot more people than we are. But the limits of policy are the limits of tolerance and acceptance of people living in the country. And why are these limits? What are the problems that people see there? People are concerned about the impact, a possibly negative impact of migration on labor markets. They're taking away our jobs. Concerns about their impact on the social welfare system. They forget that migrants pay into the welfare system, and the images that they are a burden, unjustly taking on benefits that they're not entitled to. Now, these are some of the things that you hear in the narrative, but one of the biggest concerns, and that's a very key concern, and it's unfortunate, but it is a very key concern, concerned about the cultural integrity of the EU, the concerns about the impact of migrants and the social cohesion of these societies. Surprisingly, again, although the resources would be there to actually support a lot more people than we do. Now, this very emotional debate, this very emotional discussion on migration is leading to some very worrying developments that not only negatively affect our ability to take on migrants or to provide protection to those in need, but they are also about to reform in a very worrying way, the way that the EU itself, as a political entity, functions. We have a group of, quite frankly, xenophobic, racist parties and movements that are gaining precedence, not only in Europe, but in a lot of other places around the world. So for instance, you have in a place like Sweden, which has a reputation for being very tolerant and very open and accepting of migrants, where the Swedish Democrats are taking 25% of the vote. In France, the Front National, again, a very quite xenophobic movement, is set to take on 40%, they say, of the entire voter population in 2017. So these are organizations, these are parties that are going to not only close Europe in a bigger way, but closing the borders, limiting mobility, which has always been a key of the European project as a whole, is something that they are carrying on in a big way, and we will see the consequences of that in the next few years. I'm going to sort of close my contribution and pick up the issue about of what we could be and need to be doing, and particularly in the piece of, in the sense of conflict resolution. I like to mention the so-called SDGs. It was mentioned briefly here on the first day, the so-called Sustainable Development Goals. It's UN Global Agenda for Sustainable Development, which has as one of its main goals combating poverty. And one of the things that is involved in this agenda is recognizing migration's contribution to combating poverty, recognizing migration's contribution to addressing inequalities, one of the primary motivators of migration, and demanding orderly, fair, and just migration policies. It also takes up the issue of migration in a number of other areas, protection of women migrants, peace and security, providing protection to those who need it. And I think it's something that the international community has committed itself to. They've sort of taken on ideas of how to monitor progress in this context, and it's something I think that we need to look at more carefully. Again, looking at the issue of root causes of migration, this is something that we like to talk about in Germany. If we will only get this under control if we address the root causes. And that means more development policy, which often means building more schools, which often means, to a certain degree, supporting small enterprises. It doesn't talk enough about restructuring the way the global economy functions. It needs to address more carefully the way that global trade relations are organized so that we can have a more balanced economic system which gives opportunities at home but also abroad if they need them. One of the things, and this is something that I think has been very positive about what's been happening in Germany, is that you have local communities of people who are part of this welcome culture. That's another big thing in Germany, welcome culture, who go out and receive refugees, who take people into their homes, who go with them to city services, who provide language courses in their free time and so on. We need to support these initiatives, but we also need to support, and it's something that we shouldn't forget, we have refugee and migrants groups who themselves were involved in providing these services, and we need to support them. And we need to support, and this is something that I think is absolutely key, and I think we've also recognized this in the European Union, giving people access to work. This is the one thing that highly improves the ability of migrant and refugee groups to live independent, empowered lives in our countries. And this is the area, though, where the legal barriers are some of the greatest. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. A lot of food for thought. I wonder what the policy implications of your remarks would be. We can discuss that a little bit later. Our next speaker is Ms. Lisa Craig from the Peel Community Legal Service in Australia. And you have a very short PowerPoint within
Very
10 minutes?
short.
Okay.
Hello. Thanks very much for having me here today. And thank you very much for the speakers that have preceded me. Since becoming a Rotary Peace Fellow, I feel as if that my work and my life has become a series of courageous conversations. And right now, I'm kind of taking a deep breath, and I'm stilling my heart at the prospect of speaking about Australia's attitude and response to the movement of asylum seekers and refugees. And actually, when I find it hard to talk about a difficult subject, I often go and I pat my cat to steady myself. Yeah, here she is. So let me introduce you to one of my cats. Her name is Keddy, and sometimes I take her to work with me to help me with reports. And look, there she is helping. And look, my desk looks like Ajahn Suruchai's. Yeah, so, oh, and if we're going to talk about soft power, this is the softest. Really soft. So currently in Australia, there's a government initiative to eliminate cats from the country. Like to kill cats who do not have homes, and to discourage Australians from welcoming them into their homes as friends and family and companions. And you know what, as a cat lover, I really struggle with this. And I wondered why the Australian government hated and feared cats so much. So much that they're developing a raft of new legislation to capture, control, detain, kill, and ultimately eradicate cats from the Australian landscape. So what's so scary about cats? Well, let me tell you. Research shows that cats originated in the Fertile Crescent, the Middle East, Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Iran. Research also shows that cats have travelled the world by boats. So they've landed in foreign countries and they've kind of snuggled their way into positions of power. So clearly, arriving without documentation from the Middle East by boat is enough to inspire a state of national emergency in Australia. And there's more. Cats often come with their other dangerous twin, children. And children have also been coming by boats without documentation from the Middle East to assume positions of power by infiltrating Australia's defences. So of course, we had to immediately lock them all up because children and cats were clearly a threat to our sovereignty, our identity, and our safety. So, Australian civil society has been enlivened by this notion of keeping our borders protected from these strangers. The very notion of sending babies to prison has proved somewhat triggering for the social, cultural, and political imagination of my country. The normally low-key Australian people, they've taken to the streets in large numbers to enunciate their positions one way or the other on these strangers. So some responses have been hostile and some compassionate. Most of the narrative, however, has centred around this notion of strangers. Shall we keep the strangers out, or should we welcome the strangers in? And this is where I feel so proud to be a Rotary Peace Fellow from Chula. I've invited myself to the homes of my friends from around the world, and I've been welcomed and loved. And I talk to cats. Don't try and tell me what's strange. As a peacemaker, I feel that the work that we do is indeed an act of human longing. And as David White says, that longing to risk ourselves in the world to reach a beautiful somewhere. Fortunately, those human beings willing to hazard themselves for the right thing have also raised their voices. And when they spoke, they weren't talking about strangers. And they used the very methods that constructed this notion of strangerhood to also deconstruct it. So, if I was to tell you my theory of change, you could be assured of finding some cats and some children in there, and absolutely no strangers. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. We kept the time, and it was a bit entertaining as well with the satire and the sarcasm, using cats and children as a kind of being symptomatic of a larger phobia in Australia. So our last speaker is เชิญเลยครับคุณสมพงษ์สระแก้ว
Sawadee-krap, Mingalaba Kamya, good morning everyone. Today we have many people come to join the seminar. My name is Sompong Srakaew. I'm Director of LPN Labour Rights Promotion Network Foundation. I would like to share my experience about working for migrant worker or migrant issue in Thailand. 18 years ago, I worked for migrant work in Thailand, especially 70 to 80% from Myanmar and also Laos and Cambodia. And last year, LPN set up Seafarer Action Center. We focus on Thai fishermen. They're working in Indonesia islands, especially to Ambon, Tual, and Benjina Island. They face the problem. We estimate the number of migrant workers from Thailand to Indonesia island. In the past, more than 10 years ago, I thought many people between 60,000 to 80,000 workers. But now in Indonesia have the problem also. Last year and this year, we can helping case. They have the problem in Indonesia island. Someone who are the victim human trafficking, labor trafficking from Thailand. And also we can helping case the Myanmar worker also, and Laotian also, and Cambodia also. But we focus on Thai fishermen. And also this year we advocate to Thai government, to Prime Minister, have to set up the operation to helping case in Indonesia. And also we have little time, we would like to show VCD presentation to everyone to see and can understand situation Thai fisher or migrant worker in Indonesia island. Okay. wait a minute.
บ่ได้ตั้งใจสิมาเด้โดนหลอกมายังวะโดนหลอกมาดิกลับบ่ได้ซะแล้วอย่างนี้มันอยู่ในเกาะนี่เกาะอยู่เกาะอัมบลนี่เกาะอัมบล
ใกล้แผ่นดินเข้ามาเหมือนมีวิมานตรงหน้าปลื้มนักหนาแทบโชคดี
7 การเดินทางกับ1 ปีปฏิบัติการช่วยเหลือลูกเรือประมงณประเทศอินโดนีเซียลูกเรือ 2,250 คนทั้งชาวไทยพม่าลาวกัมพูชาได้กลับบ้าน12 ปีคืออายุเฉลี่ยของเด็กชายที่ถูกขายจากแผ่นดินไทยเพื่อไปใช้แรงงานบนเรือประมงที่ประเทศอินโดนีเซียซึ่งหลายคนไม่ได้กลับมาอีกเลยเราพบลูกเรือบางคนถูกบังคับใช้แรงงานและไม่ได้กลับประเทศบ้านเกิดนานถึง22 ปีมีคนไทยที่ไร้บ้านมากกว่า500 คนถูกมอมเหล้ายาสลบและลักพาตัวเพื่อไปทำงานบนเรือประมงในจำนวนนั้นเมื่อได้รับการช่วยเหลือกลับมาพวกเขากลายเป็นคนเสียสติบางคนอยากฆ่าตัวตายบางคนพิการกว่า 70% ของลูกเรือประมงไม่ได้รับค่าแรงที่เป็นธรรมถูกใช้งานเยี่ยงทาสและทำงานมากกว่าวันละ20 ชั่วโมงเราพบว่ามีแรงงานประมงจำนวนหนึ่งทนสภาพการทำงานไม่ได้บางคนกระโดดน้ำเพื่อฆ่าตัวตายส่วนบางคนที่กระโดดเพื่อหนีเอาตัวรอดนั้นก็ติดเกาะอยู่ในหมู่บ้านต่างๆเช่นเกาะเบนจิน่าเกาะอัมบนเกาะตวนเกาะมารูเก้ซึ่งมีจำนวนไม่น้อยกว่า 1,000 คนบางคนเสียชีวิตเพราะเป็นไข้มาเลเรียงูกัดเสียชีวิตกลางป่าบางคนอดอาหารตายหรือถูกทำร้ายจากผู้มีอิทธิพลเพื่อไล่ล่าให้กลับไปทำงานในเรืออีกครั้งเราค้นหาสัมภาษณ์และเก็บข้อมูลประสานงานสถานทูตประสานงานตำรวจตรวจคนเข้าเมืองประสานงานครอบครัวเหยื่อจนกระทั่งเขาได้กลับบ้านนอกจากนี้ยังมีแรงงานประมงติดต่อขอความช่วยเหลือจากเกาะต่างๆอีกมากกว่า200 คนได้แก่เกาะเบนจิน่าเกาะอัมบนเกาะตวนเกาะโปไซนัสกะลิมันตันและเกาะซัมลักกี้ที่เราต้องลงพื้นที่ให้การช่วยเหลือในอนาคต รวมถึงศพลูกเรือนิรนามอีกจำนวน111หลุมที่ต้องดำเนินการพิสูจน์ DNA สิ่งเหล่านี้คือภารกิจต่อไป
ใกล้แผ่นดินเข้ามาเหมือนมีวิมานตรงหน้าคลื่นหนักหนาแทบถูกดิน
We have the challenges and also today we have the fishermen from Indonesia come to join the meeting also. They sit behind you. Three people are Thai and one Burmese. They have experience. Maybe after that we can share again. And more, I would like to show the condition of work in the boat Indonesia again. 2 minutes.
แรงงานทาสในเรือประมงไทยคนไทยพม่าลาวกัมพูชาถูกกระบวนการนายหน้าล่อลวงโดยคิดค่าหัวเฉลี่ยประมาณ 25,000 ถึง 30,000 บาทต่อคนโดยแรงงานทั้งหมดจะถูกนำมากักขังไว้ตามสถานที่ต่างๆเช่นบ่อกุ้งหรือร้านคาราโอเกะโดยมีคนคุมตลอดเวลารวมถึงถูกยึดเอกสารประจำตัวจากนั้นแรงงานทุกคนจะถูกถ่ายรูปเพื่อทำไทยซีแมนบุ๊กปลอมเพื่อให้ติดตามตัวได้ยากเมื่อถึงวันนัดนายหน้าจะนำแรงงานทั้งหมดส่งขึ้นเรือประมงและเรือขนส่งสินค้าขนาดใหญ่หรือที่เรียกว่าเรือแม่เรือทัวร์เมื่อแรงงานเดินทางมาถึงจุดหมายที่ประเทศอินโดนีเซียแรงงานจะถูกส่งต่อไปยังเรือต่างๆเช่นเรือเฮียเอ5 คนเรือเฮียบี10 คนแรงงานจะถูกบังคับให้ทำงานมากกว่า20 ชั่วโมงต่อวันโดยมีหน้าที่ดังนี้สาวอวนแยกปลาเย็บอวนเรียงปลาและยกปลาในห้องแช่แข็งอุณหภูมิ-32 องศาโดยไม่มีอุปกรณ์ป้องกันความเย็นไม่ได้รับน้ำและอาหารที่เพียงพอถูกทำร้ายทุบตีโดยอาวุธที่ใช้คือหางปลากระเบนเหล็กแป๊บน้ำร้อนจนกระทั่งใช้ปืนกรณีป่วยหนักทำงานไม่ไหวจะไม่ได้รับการรักษาและบางคนถูกโยนลงทะเลบางส่วนหนีขึ้นไปอาศัยอยู่บนเกาะบางส่วนเสียชีวิตจากอุบัติเหตุบนเรือบางคนอยากกลับบ้านแต่ตายและนายจ้างไม่ให้กลับจนสิ้นหวังเสียสติบางคนทนสภาพงานหนักไม่ไหวกระโดดน้ำฆ่าตัวตายในที่สุดบางคนติดอยู่ที่เกาะนานสุด22 ปีไม่เคยได้กลับบ้านเรือประมงจะมีสัมปทานการหาปลา 3-6 ปีแต่เรือส่วนใหญ่จะลักลอบหาปลาโดยไม่ต่อสัมปทานเป็นการทำประมงแบบ IUU จนกระทั่งเรือพังจึงกลับเข้าฝั่งแต่แรงงานประมงจะถูกส่งต่อไปยังเรือลำอื่นที่สำคัญแรงงานประมงไม่เคยได้รับค่าแรงอย่างเป็นธรรมและทำไมชีวิตลูกเรือประมงถึงมีราคาถูกกว่าปลา
This case is a reality case, and also about story in Indonesia have the report from U.S. government trafficking in person also, and they concern, and also I think that ASEAN must to do more this year again because have many people they wait for helping. And some boat they was arrested from Indonesia government, and many people in jail and called to ASEAN to helping again. Okay, I would like to thank you everyone for intention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sompong. When I saw this program with 1 hour for 5 speakers, I knew that it would run late. So with the forbearance of the organizers, I would like to ask to extend this by 15 minutes in the interest of audience participation and in order to give a little bit more time to the speakers. So the floor is open for questions and comments. while the questions and comments are coming, I have a few. So for Dr. Tahay, you know, the election results were not so good for the Arakan or the Rakhine party. Why is that? Please just refrain. Keep that with you. And then with the others, you know, this is a great conference, but the reality is very cold and cruel. Sovereignty dictates, borders dominate. We have a lot of problems. So in Europe, I just came back from Norway. This is a country of 5 million. Next year, they will have to take in 100,000 plus refugees, not asylum seekers. What Kun Sompong has presented is very good. Thailand is very much in the news on the labor abuse, the maltreatment of labor, slave labor. This is the underside of migrant labor. Okay, there's an industry, it's something else. But for the refugees in Europe, the sources, it seems to me, they're coming from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq. These are the problems of the last 15 years since September 11th. And when they come to a country like Norway, and bear in mind that European countries tend to have generous, pretty comfortable welfare states, so the resources are more demanding to accommodate refugees. And in addition, there's another core reality that when you fuse this or conflate it with the terrorist Islamist radicalization, you have potential problems, like you have in France, the suspects, the perpetrators that have been uncovered, they've come from certain neighborhoods, they've come from certain minority groups that came from abroad. So some people fear, and that's why we're seeing a rise of anti-immigration sentiments all across Europe, that this could be the hotbed of more terrorism. It's a different creature, a different kind of challenge that we have in Southeast Asia. The undermanned migration crisis. These are persecuted Rohingyas who are seeking jobs, seeking to rejoin their families. They want to go to Malaysia. We also have Uyghurs from Xinjiang, Western China, who want to also join their families in Turkey. So that, you know, there are a lot of strands of migration here, different strands, different challenges, different dilemmas. But I think that, you know, to be constructive in concrete terms, we have to confront very cold and cruel realities of migration, people movements. So I'll leave that with the speakers, and then I'll go back to the floor for any questions or comments, if you're not too hungry. Please just tell us who you are and then keep it short.
Hi, I'm Maria Arsenas from the Philippines, Rotary Peace Fellow, Class 9. I have a comment and a question. My first comment is about the dynamics of Southeast Asia. I think that there are two Southeast Asias. One is the mainland Southeast Asia that I think you very well put, Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand, and you have the island Southeast Asia. So in terms of the problems, the issues, I think that it's very different, like what we have in the Philippines. The next is just a question. I read somewhere that there are more countries in Europe that are accepting refugees and migrants than the Arab countries. So when you talk about cultural assimilation, I'm just a little bit, you know, I just need clarification. No? Why is it that more European countries are accepting migrants and refugees than Arab countries if you talk about culture assimilation? So thank you very much. I think very interesting perspectives.
Okay, we'll take one more. Please, the lady.
Hello, my name is Claudia. I have a very short commentary and a question for Dr. Abu and for Mr. Sompong. You both talk a little bit, in relation to what happened with displaced people in Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar, and so. And the other side of that people's situation is that they create a very cheap labor force or slavery, as you last shows. I would like you to hear a little more about whose benefit with this under the perspective of global economy. Who is benefit with this kind of cheap labor force or slavery? I mean, talking about the roots of the displacement people, I want to know more about your perspective on that. That was clear about my question? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we'll take one more.
I'm Chris Bertucci from the Mindanao Peacebuilding Institute in the Philippines. I have a question for Dimitria and Anoop regarding the situation now. Last night on BBC, I heard that there are 11 nations now bombing Syria, and the UK wanted to become the 12th. In your opinion, what do you see as the trend, and will this end or will it not end in terms of responding this way, as you said, through bombs rather than through dialogue or whatever? And what would be your ideas about what can peace builders do, like ourselves, in this situation with the world really in crisis? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll have to take the last one, sure. And it's a short one, right? Yeah.
My name is Imtiaz Ahmed. I'm a Bangkok-based journalist. I'd like to talk about the accountability of global leaders and the responsibility of this for consequences of their actions. 12 years ago, we were told there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It turned out there was not a teaspoon of weapons of mass destruction there, and the people who lied to us about those weapons of mass destruction are now walking free, and the consequences are here to be seen today with all these refugees and other crises. Why are those people walking free, and what can be done to bring them to account?
Okay, that'll be, I think, plenty for the speakers. This absolutely has to be the last one, please. Can you please speak to the microphone? Yeah, please.
My name is Clayton, and I have a question for Ms. Dimitria. I would like to know, at the policy level, what is the most efficient policy to stop the migrants of the African migrants to drown at sea in the Mediterranean? So how to stop them to reach the European shore as the Australian, even though their policy was quite controversial, do stop the boat people to get the Australia continent. Thank you.
Okay, so the last one is how to slow down or stop migration in the Mediterranean, yeah, from North Africa. Okay, thank you, and I'll leave that for you. The first, I think, is an established fact now in the literature that the Southeast Asia is a little bit more divided between the maritime domain and mainland domain. But your question then is. How come the Arab states not doing more, not carrying more burdens, carrying their weight in handling, managing the people movements? That's a good one. And then who benefits from the cheap migrant labor? The bombing of Syria, would that help? Would that actually lead to something constructive, positive, or otherwise? And then what should peace builders do in between? I think these two questions with the responsibility, the accountability of global leaders, with the question of the bombing of Syria, and then the the regime change in Iraq and so on. I think these are kind of the same cluster of remarks and questions. So a lot to go on. I think we'll start with Dr. Abu Tahay. 2 minutes.
I got 2 minutes, but 2 questions to respond. First one is who are the responsibles for the case of Myanmar? Of course, the first actors will be the responsible. The first actor is our governments, based on 2 issues to address. The first, all ethnic peoples need federal democracy straight. To proceed that one, we need to amend our constitution operation. Without that, we can do ceasefire agreements, but we cannot stop long-running civil wars. That is causing Myanmar peoples fled from own country, become illegal, undocumented workers in every way. Second point, for the Rohingya issues, there is 3 challenges. The first one is denial of their existence in their own country. Second one is 1982 citizenship law. Third one is retrospective effects. Both are directly related to the governments. That is why government is the first person to take the obligation and responsible to address it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we'll go down the row.
Yeah, sorry, thank you.
Mr. Anoop.
I think I'll just take a couple of the 2 questions. One of the questions with regard to the fact that, or the question about the flow of Arab refugees to the Arab states. I think it's really putting the question a little bit wrong. What do you define as Arab countries? Most of the refugees from Syria and also Iraq were going to neighboring countries, which is where most of the refugees are. The population, as Dimitria is pointing out, is just a small minority that's going to Europe. So that the debate, again, going back to Chomsky's argument, this is manufacturing consent. It is a myth that is being indicated as a massive flow. Yes, there are countries which can take more. That is Saudi Arabia and the Gulf, which obviously are buddies, and therefore there are no questions being asked. They can take more and they don't. That is a fact. But to lump the entire Arab world as one homogeneous whole, I think is frankly quite problematic. And the point, I'm sorry, the question that you were asking was with regard to, I got a bit muddled up. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry. I think we're going around in circles. That's why I started off. When we forget history, we're bound to repeat it. We have seen the same thing during the Vietnam War. We have seen this all over again. I mean, shall we sing, Bob Dylan again? How many bombs does it take for you to realize it's not going to work? How many people should die before we wake up? I mean, it's flower power again, isn't it? Why don't we learn? John Lennon, wake up. This is a fact. And it takes hegemonic power for people to assume that life does not matter elsewhere. That is problematic, and that's central to it.
Thank you. Lisa Craig?
I remember Dr. Roper saying about peacebuilders requiring a level of patience in that following the trajectory of peace over a lifetime. And I think that's particularly difficult at a time when the world seems to be in conflict in every arena. However, I hold on to that. And when I think about creating a culture of welcome in all of our countries, I think we have a pivotal role to play in mainstreaming empathy-based education and not hardening ourselves to welcoming people to our world. And this is where fear has a lot of currency, particularly in Australia. And I think that is where we need to meet that with a currency of equal and opposite and empathetic force.
Thank you. Dimitria.
I, first of all, wanted to say something briefly about a point that our moderator made about the concerns of places like Norway with the population of 5 million having to take on 100,000 or however many refugees and asylum seekers, and that certainly is quite a large number for such a small community, but we have to remember that refugee and asylum movements have been around for a very long time, long before September 11th, and the Scandinavian countries had a very good history of taking on Syrian, Somali, and other Islamic refugees, and they did a very good job of it. They have the resources to do so. The thing about the Arab countries, if you look at Lebanon, for instance, it takes on 200, or it has a population of 200 refugees to each 1,000. If you look at Germany, again, a much richer, much more resourceful country, it has a proportion of 0.9% to 1,000. So a much smaller population, although the resources actually to take on people and give them the protection they need would be greater. It's not a matter of resources, it's a matter, the limits of tolerance, something that my colleague has been saying something about. The acceptance, the tolerance, the concerns about cultural difference, the concerns about terrorism are the real limits to policies. And that is part of the crisis. And I think it's something we need to consider. And I think that things like peace education in these communities, in these societies, which teaches us a society of tolerance, that teaches us something about the reasons that people are forced to move, and encourages our empathy and our willingness to help are very important in this context. This is probably not the right order, but the question about what can we do to keep people from going to the Mediterranean and taking on these dangerous journeys to get to European shores. I think that one of the things we need are more legal avenues for migration into the European Union. I think that would help. And again, we used to have a debate. We still have this debate. I mean, the whole refugee and asylum aspect is only one aspect. Europe is still very interested in legal labor migration, and they are working on that as well. But these are avenues that are probably closed to the great majority of people being forced to leave today to come to Europe. And I think we need to reconsider that. I also think that, however, the idea of creating conditions in the countries of origin that make it possible for people who want to stay. I don't think everybody has to stay. I think people should have a right to migrate if they want to. But for people who want to stay, I think we need greater conditions of peace and prosperity and security in these countries there. And I think the European Union, the United States, the West can make a greater contribution to that. Yes. I'm not sure, but I think that those were two of the questions that I was asked.
Very good, thank you. Thank you, Kun Sompong. Anything else you would like to add? Thailand has been in the spotlight for the subject you've raised.
Okay, I want to talk about slavery at sea. When ASEAN take the case closely, the case and helping get more than 1,400 case from Indonesia and come back to Thailand and also come back to Myanmar, Laos and Cambodia. We heard about new slavery, but if we take the case closely, I thought that Thailand have slavery more than 30 years ago. And also who got the benefit or profit to them, the Thai companies, and also the owners, the boats, they go to fishing in Thai Sea, not only Indonesia country, to Madagascar, to India, to South Africa also. But now we heard about the boats to Madagascar. And also we have to check with the Thai government if are you do fishing or not, and go to fishing in international sea. And also how we can protect the human trafficking Thai fisher or migrant worker from original of Thailand to Indonesia again. I thought that Thai government how now we have many measures and to cooperate to another agency, and also we expand APEN try to do with the detailer from EU and USA detailer come to Thailand. And we have one case the last 2 weeks ago, we have the case in the food processing factory about the shrimp. But now EU try to force to not only in Thai boat and focus and expand to food processing related or look like supply chain. And now APEN try to do more about advocate to the business company about the supply chain transparency, and also to check to farmland to the sea. In this year and next year, we try to focus to supply chain transparency and cooperate with the in the shore. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. We're out of time. I think it's fair to say that peace builders, peacemakers, peace advocates of all stripes have a daunting tall order. You will not be out of a job. I think the future that we have in the near term will be more conflict, more tensions, and more war. So a tall order for us to think about, but we have to keep trying. So thank you very much. Please join me in thanking the speakers, and thank you for joining. And lunch is next.
Just a note about lunch. I just heard from the team that's managing that the lunch team is a little bit behind schedule. So they'll probably be ready about 10 minutes or so from now. So you're welcome to walk at a little bit of a slower pace. And you'll want, yeah, okay, or Dr. Srakaew is saying go straight even though they're not ready. And so he said head on over. Feel free to be back by 1:30 at the latest, Dr. Srakaew? 1:30 at the latest, and we'll still have an hour and 15 minutes for the breakout sessions.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your very nice presentation.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. There were
it only takes one, right? But that is